Hey, good evening, everyone. I just want to thank you for stopping by my channel. This is Spanky Gibson. This is the second video I've done as of yet. Beginning of the week, I did my first video. Just talked a little bit about myself and the intention of this channel, why I decided to come onto YouTube. But this evening, I want to talk about some other things. I want to talk about what we consider in the Marine Corps called a jack of all trades. Someone you expect to do a little bit of everything, and how a jack of all trades becomes a good leader. There's plenty of aspects I think a lot of people don't realize that leadership is critical to. As I said before, they might just think it's some form of military law enforcement, something of that nature where it's expected there, but outside of the military or law enforcement or certain types of positions, maybe the people won't be as militant, or doesn't require or does require militant actions or something of that nature. Well, part of being a jack of all trades is weighs heavily on being a good leader or a natural leader or trained to be a leader. Some people are naturally leaders. Some people can become great leaders when they're trained properly. Some of us that do a career in the military, we have to go through a lot of training to become a good leader and hopefully one day a great leader. But we go to corporal's course, sergeant's course, staff academy, career development courses. Officers have the exact same thing, just a little bit higher level because they have a little bit more responsibility than we do on the enlisted side. But I want to ask you, what do you think a good leader is? Do you feel that, having, leadership qualities is important? Qualities like courage. Obviously in the military, that's pretty big, especially when we go into combat or we have to make a tough decision or we do something wrong and we have to stand up and accept the fact and tell those that are in charge of us, yes, we were wrong, we did something bad. Do you have the ability to communicate? Can you sit back and listen, and then based off of what those people around you are saying, able to communicate the right direction to them in a way that they will accept? Communication is critical in not only leadership, but everyday living. That jack of all trades, someone that can do a little bit of everything, maybe nothing perfect, but can do a lot. Communication is going to be one of those key principles that they live and work by. And it's no different in, any of the civilian jobs that I did. We don't walk in and expect to bark orders and have someone listen to us or respect us. How do you feel about that? Somebody's barking at you and you didn't do anything wrong, or you were surprised by it, or you're not used to it. How would you feel? You wouldn't like it. Marines, service members ain't any different. They can expect it for a certain period of time, or if they did something wrong, but they don't want to be barked at all the time. They don't want to be yelled at. They want mutual respect, even though they might be a lower or higher rank than the other person. Civilian community is no different. You have, a family. You're married. You have children. We've all done it. That we've yelled at our kids or yelled at our spouse. It could be out of fear. It could be out of anger. It could be for all kinds of different reasons. But we raise a voice. Like my wife, I have levels of what I call my big boy voice. I can roar it up pretty loud. That's like a 1. And, I can really use my diaphragm and project my voice if I have to. That's part of being a career Marine. But we've all seen it. Even if it's, a toddler not paying attention and getting ready to chase a ball out into the street, and what are you doing, initially, or your reaction is to roar out, stop, or get their attention, and that just adds more fear into the situation. But we've all done it. They didn't like it. It scared them. excuse me, we don't like doing it, but it's our natural instinct. So no one likes to be roared at or yelled at or barked at. So we have to learn to communicate in a way that is acceptable around us. And that is key. And then on top of that communication, not just the octave that you use or the way that you do it, you have to be able to communicate differently amongst people differently. You have to use what you know of that person to communicate in a style and in a way that they're receptive to. That works up and down the food chain when it comes to being a leader. And that gets manipulated around. And the more people that work for you or the more people you work with, the more you have to do that. The more you have to turn around and remember, how do I, get through to this person? A new person comes on a team and then you have to figure out, okay, I'm gonna talk, I know to talk this way. I know that they communicate better in this way. And, look at your children if you have them, or look at your spouse. Sometimes that communication platform might not even be verbally. It might be just putting a note. I had a boss that I was a Marine recruiter for 3 years, right here in Northeast Oklahoma, where I'm from. And he knew that the style of Marine sergeant that I was at that time, he could yell at me all he wanted, and it wasn't going to bother me. I wasn't fear or intimidated by that way of communicating. But he knew if he took a sticky note, and this 20-some years ago, so we had desk calendars, he would take a sticky note and he'd pop it on my desk calendar and say, "Right along with Spanky today." I'd come in that morning, he'd always be there before us. I'd sit down, I'd go over my calendar, I'd go over what my tasks were going to be for the day, and I'd look down and I'd be like, "Oh, hell no." And I'd storm into his office and I'm, "Boss, what in the world? Why you don't need to be riding with me. You don't trust me." I would aggressively communicate back to him, and he knew that was the best way to reach me. He knew he'd get my attention. And he wasn't manipulating me. He knew how to make me work better and be way better at my job, which was true. I ended up being the recruiter of the year. I ended up getting meritorious promoted to staff sergeant. And for many of you, that doesn't mean anything. But that's huge in the military if you get meritorious promoted to a staff NCO rank. That means you've stood out amongst your peers and you've done very, very well. And that was all based on him. Yes, I did the legwork, but he did, the communication. So then you got to think, we kind of talk about that courage when we talk about communications, two critical factors and qualities in a leader. But we have to gain trust too. I don't know how you all feel about that trust. As a matter of fact, if you guys would just comment down below, just on the little bit we've talked to, or maybe some ideas you have. But, integrity, having trustworthiness is critical as a leader and a follower. If the people around you, your team doesn't trust you and they don't think you have good integrity, you're going to be outcast. And, in the civilian world, you could possibly even be fired, or you won't be trusted, or you might just do that job until you're tired of it and you leave because you never get promoted. So integrity is a critical issue. Now, it's easy for us in the military because, I'm not saying we don't break integrity, we do, but integrity is key to that job and to that team and basically to your individual growth. You got to be honest to yourself, no different than you have to be honest to everybody else. And then probably the last biggest thing I'll say about this, and talking about qualities in a leader, but qualities that we might look for in a leader, is empathy and compassion. Now, you might think that's weird coming from a Marine. No, I'm a mid-50s man. I've got grandkids. I've been retired 15 years. Yeah, my wife has worn off on me, and I call it, she's made me a better man, but she's domesticated me in a lot of ways. But, I appreciate and love her for it, because it's probably better for me. Because like when I first retired and came out here in the real world and I was a single parent, I had my 2 sons, I was barking at them. I was barking at people around me. I didn't know how to transition very well. Even though I'd done 22 years in the Marine Corps, I was 40 years old. I wasn't a kid. But it still was a difficult transition after you've done something since you're 17 years old. But that compassion, that empathy is also critical, for many, many reasons. And come on, guys, that's common sense. I think all of us, once we realize, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in a job, whether it's amongst, just our friends or amongst someone that we've been around that's been injured, you've got to have empathy and you have to have compassion. And that is critical through life. Like I keep saying, not only in a job, not only in a relationship or how you interact with your kids, it's critical. So that's probably the last thing. I'll keep that, I'll end that at this point. I just wanted to get in front of you guys, talk to you. I would like it if you would definitely comment, give me thoughts, and tell me what you might like to see in the future for me to cover. I would also ask you, I didn't think I did this in the last video, my first video, it's my second. If you appreciate this, like it, and if you would subscribe, so I can reach out and talk to more people. And if you really enjoy it, you can follow me at Spanky Gibson 71 on X. I've been on there for about a year now, and I've actually reconnected with a lot of people that I knew throughout my career, and I would love to connect with you on there. So if you feel you want to know more, comment, give me ideas, subscribe, follow me on X at Spanky Gibson 71, and then if you would, and you haven't, watch this first video. It'll be one way or another. I'm going to figure out how to get that thing in there. And I would appreciate if you'd watch that and understand a little bit more about me, and that maybe can grow your comments, or that can give you ideas what to ask. And like I said, you'll learn that video. This is a two-way street here. Yeah, I'm talking to you as a camera, but you comment, I'll get right back to you. You give me ideas, or you give me things you would like to see or talk about, I will definitely get that back to you. So once again, Spanky Gibson, appreciate you stopping by, and you have a good evening. Thank you.